Hi everyone, this is Amy from the Helms Academy, and today we're doing a lesson on decimals, fractions, and percent. So for today, our objectives will be to define the key terms, to identify some common conversions of decimals, fractions, and percents that would be good to memorize, and to change some numbers into their different forms between fractions to decimals, decimals to percent, and percent back to fractions. Let's start with our key terms. So we need to know first what is a fraction, a decimal, and a percent. Well, a fraction has a numerator, which is the top number, and the denominator, which is a bottom number. And they'll have a line in between them. That line is similar to a division symbol. The decimal represents numbers that are less than 1 by placing them to the right of the decimal point. So for example, 1, the whole number 1, would be 1 decimal point 0. But if we had something smaller than 1, we would move that number to the other side. So for example, 0.5 would be half of a whole number, 1. Percent is a representation of an amount that gives a number out of the total value of 100. So we'll see things like 25%, 50%, and you always see that percent sign, which we'll see here shortly. All three of these terms represent a portion of a whole. So whether we have a fraction or a decimal or percent, it's not the whole thing, it's some part of it. So these are a few of the common conversions I think would be helpful to know. If you know some of the basic conversions of fractions, decimals, and percents, like the ones you see on the screen, it'll be so much easier to make comparisons between these types of numbers, to convert other similar numbers in your head, and just to generally make better guesses about the work that you're doing, whether it's on a test or on your practices for the GED, HiSET, or TASC. So for example, if I see the fraction 1/10, I know that the decimal form will be 0.1 and the percent form of that is 10%. And these are all the same value, 1/10, 0.1, and 10%. It's just that they're written in 3 different forms. Same thing with 1/4, 0.25, and 25%. Now with 1/3, you'll see that the decimal is 0.333333333. It goes on forever. Sometimes you'll see just 0.3 with a line over it, and that means that that 3 repeats indefinitely. So the decimal sometimes is rounded, right, to something like 0.33, just to keep it a little bit simpler, or just 0.3 on its own. Now the percent we will usually see as 33.3, and occasionally, again, you'll see that line over the 0.3 to show that it repeats forever. For half, the decimal is 0.5 and the percent is 50%. For 2/3, the decimal, similar to 1/3, right? It's just double that, because double 1/3 would be 2/3, so double that decimal. Think about 3 doubled would be 6. So this you just have 0.6 repeating. And again, the percent very similar, 66.6%, where you might see that repeating sign over that 0.6. 3/4 is 0.75. So you can also think about this as if you have 3/4 of something, which we will often say 3/4 as 3/4. Think about actual quarters like money in your head. That'd be 75 cents, right? Or 75%. Same thing with the full number 1. This is a good gauge because it shows you how things transition. So the whole number 1 is written just as the 1. It's not written with the slash to have the fraction. The decimal form would just be 1.0, or just 1 is fine as well. And the percent would be 100%. So with these in mind, again, these are good to memorize, to store away in your brain, and to practice. One way that you can practice this is by writing this table out yourself and leaving some blanks, and then challenging yourself to fill in the blanks. You could also take a picture of this, or again, fill this out yourself and cover up one column and see what you can remember by looking at the other columns. All right, so let's talk about some conversions and how we actually make these conversions if they're not something that we have memorized. So for a fraction to a decimal, let's say I need to make that change. I want to turn my fraction into a decimal. Well, all I actually have to do is divide the top number by the bottom number. So this is easiest to do if you have a calculator, and I would encourage all of you to practice using the calculator because you can use it on your test. So this is the calculator that's allowed on the GED or the TASC or the HiSET test. It's called the TI-30XS. And you can find this calculator available online. They sell it in Walmart, Staples, and if you're a Helms Academy student, when we are in the classroom, we have some available there as well. So all you would have to do is say 2 divided by 5, and the calculator would tell you it is 0.4. Or 5 divided by 8, and the calculator would tell you it's 0.625. So that's one very quick way to change from fraction to decimal. Now, of course, you could do the long division and write it all out, right? 2 divided by 5. How many times does 5 go into 2? It would be 0. So that's an option as well, and you can write out all of those steps. But again, if you have a calculator, I'd encourage you to use it because it is one of the greatest tools that you'll have on the test. Now on this calculator, I also want you to know that there is this button down at the bottom. I understand it's a little bit difficult to see on this screen, but what it is, it's the little button right above the enter or equals sign that has 2 arrows pointing in either direction, and it's a conversion button. So if I type in 2/5 as a fraction and hit the conversion button, it will turn it into a decimal for me. And if I type in 0.4 and hit the conversion button, it will turn it back into a fraction for me. So that's a great little trick to store away. Again, will save you a lot of time on the test. Now for our next one, we're going to look at how to change a decimal to a percent. So all you have to do, and this is maybe my favorite one because it's the easiest, is move the decimal point 2 places to the right and add a percent sign. So you'll see we have 0.4. So we need to take that decimal point and bring it over 2 places to the right. So that means that we'll have to add a 0 in there, right? So it'd be like 40.0 and just add our percent sign. Same thing, and maybe it's a little easier to see. If we have that 0.625, we're going to take that decimal place over 2 spots to the right. So we will have 62.5%. Now to change a percent back into a fraction, we need to make the percent into a fraction out of 100 and then simplify. So remember how we talked before that the percentages are actually out of a total of 100%? Well, we can just rewrite that as, for example, 40%, 40 over 100. And those things are equal. Now, when I simplify 40 out of 100, the first thing I might think of is, well, 40 out of 100 and 4 out of 10. I could just remove a 0 out of either one. But I could simplify even further and make it 2 out of 5. So 40% is equal to 2/5. Now we've made it full circle. Now, it's a little bit more complicated on the bottom when we have a percentage that has a decimal in it. So let's look at that. So if I have 62.5%, I would do the same thing as I did up above. I would put that 62.5 over 100. Now, that makes it a little bit more complicated to simplify. So while we can do that, I always find it a little bit easier to just move the decimal place over 1 spot for both of the top and the bottom number, the numerator and the denominator. So that would mean that my number becomes 625 out of 1,000. And again, these are equal. 62.5 out of 100 and 625 out of 1,000 have the same value. So if I simplify that down, the 625 over 1,000, eventually, by simplification process, I will get 5/8. Now you can see that here there's the chart, right? We had our initial fraction of 2/5. We found the decimal was 0.4 and the percent was 40%. The fraction was 5/8. The decimal was 0.625 and the percent was 62.5%. These are all the same values across the board. The 2/5, the 0.4, the 40%, they all mean the same thing. It's just 3 different ways of writing them. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope that you learned something new about decimals, fractions, and percents. You can check out more of our videos by subscribing to our channel below. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook, or you can check out helmsacademy.org.